Hello and welcome to this Veza demo. In this Veza demo, what I'd like to really focus about is really around the how and some of the why. So we'll be walking through basic integration, some of the key capabilities of the Veza platform, and diving into some use cases around privileged threat detection and threat hunting, and as well as access reviews, access certifications, and lifecycle management. So let's go ahead and dive in. So really, the key within how Veza works, the first step is just talking about integration. Quick time to value. Veza is up and running in very little time, very little effort. Give us read-only access to some of your key systems. Give us read access into AWS, Active Directory, Azure AD, you name it, right? Cloud applications, Salesforce, et cetera, et cetera. And we're able to, then crawl and pull back any and every information, any information related to helping us answer the question around who can actually do what. So we pull back the metadata associated with users, groups, entitlements, permissions, roles, and we pull that back into Veza, right? And perhaps the best way to kind of like illustrate the power of Veza is through the graph, right? So after you pull everything into Veza, you're able to now quickly search for things like, for example, being able to show my IDP users, be it Okta, be it Ping, be it Azure AD, whatever that is. If I want to say, show me all of my Okta users in relationship to something like an S3 bucket, for example, right? So in a couple of clicks here, now I have a full mapping, a full understanding of what these relationships are. And I can drill down. Let me just zoom in here a little bit more. I can drill down and see which users through which role, through which groups, right, intermediary groups, are able to assume what roles on these systems, and what do these roles really mean, right, in terms of actual CRUD. So one of the big problems with RBAC and individual out of cloud models, if you will, is the fact that each and every one of them has a different way, right? So you have AWS IAM, you have Azure RBAC, Salesforce does it completely different, right? Box, et cetera, et cetera. So what Veza is doing is effectively going and crawling and discovering what the actual raw permissions are, what are the decision trees associated with these permissions, and then giving you a net outcome of that access. Can user create, read, update, delete. So I no longer have to go and become an expert in each and every one of those platforms to be able to understand what is the actual effective truth of the access and the nature of the access. So from here, what I can then do is convert this into an actual control, right? So I can add more color into this, right? I can add more information about risk, right? I can say, show me only Okta users, for example, that have a high risk profile, right? And we can configure and we can tweak what high risk conditions really mean. And I can drill down further into this. And I can say, show me high risk users that can actually go and perform data delete, for example, right? So you can see the navigation, the understanding of quickly understanding where you actually need to shift your focus to becomes very easy. And we also assess risk scoring, right? An over provision score, right? So meaning, I'll dive into these individually, right? So let's first take on risk score. Risk score is basically the net aggregate of all of the risk that's associated with this identity. So you can see this risk score is at 100 because the user is violating multiple different things, right? User has MFA disabled, they're violating some SOD policies, they have multiple IDPs that basically have a certain percentage of access to something like secrets, right? So this all feeds into the equation of that user's risk score, right? And obviously you can introduce your own risk components, right? And define them and quantify them. Over provision score effectively means for the actual S3 buckets that are assigned for each and every user, there's a certain percentage that is not being utilized, right? That's what over provision score really means. So I can say Audrey Clark, for example, here with a risk score of 100, has never ever utilized her S3 bucket access to the following buckets that are listed in the same report, right? And you can see what the actual effective permissions are. So now organizations can work on really kind of removing and revoking that access and downsizing the potential blast radius for a user that is highly critical with access to sensitive resources. So this information is also API accessible, right? So I can go and programmatically pull this information from Veza via API. So for more egregious type of scenarios where you're not necessarily, where you would want the platform to immediately go and revoke access based off of the information or based on the context that's provided in Veza, you can go and call out to the API and immediately get a list of these users and their assigned access and start to go and pull that away. But I can convert this as well into an alerting rule, right? So I can basically say for any time this scenario happens, so anytime I actually have, high risk users that can delete S3 buckets, right? We can mark that as a high risk violation. I can go and create my own tagging or my own naming around label, right? And I can create an actual associate a risk level with this, right? And you can customize that. And I can go and set this and assign an actual alert rule, right? So I can say anytime this actually occurs, go ahead and basically fire anytime the conditions are met, go ahead and do something, right? And this something could be really anything. It could be to go and certify access, right? So I can go and launch certification workflow. I could basically go and integrate send a ServiceNow notification, right, to create an incident, right, to notify someone, and so on and so forth. So I can actually have a multi-threaded method here, right, to go and address risk accordingly. Some of it active, some of it more passive, all through webhooks, right? Let's go ahead and save this and convert this into a control. So what you'd effectively now have in Veza, and moving on into some of the more operational side of things, is really a list of do's and don'ts within the organization, right? So I can now codify my best practices. I can define SOD policies. I can define least privilege policies. And Veza becomes this passive monitoring tool that is constantly looking for these high fidelity type of risk scenarios or over privileged scenarios, and go and pretty much enable you to take action on those right then and there, including launch certification review process, right? Which is a critical kind of like shift in the way we're starting to see things move in the industry from a more kind of reactive into a more proactive type of certification, right? So the launch certifications when things deviate instead of waiting once a quarter, right? So now that you have these rules, I can go and effectively, like I said, there's two ways that you can tie into more actionable type of routes or more actionable type of path here. And one of them is the review process, and the other one is the alerting, right? I can tie in my orchestration, so I can go and introduce hooks into ServiceNow. I can introduce custom webhooks. I can add all of these things, and we make that easy. And we have out-of-box support for a number of those. And I can associate these webhooks and actions with rules, as well as bake them into the access review process. So what the access review process ends up looking for something like an S3 bucket is truly revealing, right? Because one of the big challenges for organizations is really helping the auditor or the person that's approving access and giving them the full context of access. I, as a manager of these 4 or 5 users or identities, I need more context to be able to click on approve and reject, right? And this is again where Veza comes into the picture, where we're effectively giving you that level of visibility right within the actual report. So I know that Lisa Barnes can go and perform create, delete, update, etc. on Sigma Finance. Do I want to approve or do I want to reject? Right? Obviously, we can go and define bulk actions within Veza, right? And I can do kind of like predefined actions to go approve and reject based off of condition. And ultimately, this is something that, like I said earlier, I can go and trigger a remediation webhook as part of that integration, right? So I can go and tie orchestration actions, what happens on approval, what happens on rejection. And I guess one of the important things to highlight here as well is the fact that we understand resource ownership within Veza, right? So I can go and reassign the reviewer based off of resource owners, and you can define resource and owners in Veza. So I, as an identity manager, I may not necessarily know if I need to certify this engineering profile, for example, for access into S3. I would want to go back and say, okay, reassign to a reviewer. I can go and define a list of pre-approved reviewers for this type of resource, or I can designate somebody else, for example, and go from there. So that's it for the access reviews. And I guess moving on to something that is more aligned with risk and more aligned with risk visibility. What Veza gives you out of the box is really a list of reports, right? So in our example, we went and we created a query, right? Or we created a report based off of the context that we wanted to see. Like this is the one that we created together, one that we created together earlier. But we ship with quite a lot out of the box, pre-built, pre-existing queries around best practices, around IAM insights, around Azure individual queries for individual platforms, PCI-centric reports and dashboards, right? Risk reports and dashboards. So those are all made available out of the box. So it gives you quick time to value when it comes down to quickly understanding what are the areas you want to shift your focus to around dormant entities, around AWS IAM insights, Salesforce dedicated report, right? So this is very much part of the key value that Veza provides around being able to give you quick time to value so that you can quickly understand what the current state of access is within your organization, what are some of the key areas that you want to shift your focus to, right? And how to actually make the right decisions about access moving forward. I hope you enjoyed this quick demo and quick demo overview of Veza. Please reach out if you have any questions. I look forward to meeting you in person.